Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
Now, in 1922, Madam President, the first robust anti-lynching bill was successfully passed by the House of Representatives. Once it came to the Senate, a bloc of Southern segregationists mounted a filibuster to kill it in its tracks. Over the decades, similar bills met similar fates. Throughout the 20th century, scores of anti-lynching bills were introduced only to be promptly buried into obscurity. In 2018, Congress came closer than ever to finally passing anti-lynching legislation before it was thwarted at the 11th hour. But last night, finally, after more than 200 failed attempts to declare lynching a federal crime, the Senate succeeded in taking long overdue action by passing the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. Hallelujah. Congress has finally declared lynching a federal crime, as it should have done more than a century ago. That it took so long is a permanent, bitter stain on American history. But finally, a century's worth of efforts have now paid off. To say this is a historic accomplishment is impossibly inadequate. Generations of civil rights leaders and advocates dedicated their lives to getting Congress to recognize the obvious, the humane, obvious truth that lynching was an intolerable injustice inflicted primarily on disenfranchised Black Americans. Thousands upon thousands of Black Americans have been victims of lynch mobs across the country, and in different states rarely responded, if ever. Many of the sworn officers of these states and localities not only ignored, but often participated when these atrocities occurred. Despicable, horrible. America should be so ashamed of this chapter in her history. And while no single congressional action can fully erase the injustices committed against victims of lynching, last night was an important step in the never-ending work of perfecting our union. Only by confronting the darkest elements of our history can we make straight the path towards a brighter and more just future. I want to really applaud Senator Booker. He has been diligent and hardworking and valiant in getting this to happen. He had a great partner in Senator Scott, bipartisan. And on the House side, the person who lit this candle and kept it glowing, even in the most disappointing of times, was Bobby Rush. He never gave up. Congress has finally taken action, and this bill now heads to President Biden's desk, finally, for signature. Now on Omni and COVID. Republicans and Democrats continue making good progress towards reaching a deal to fund the government. We are almost there. We are very, very close, and hopefully it will be done in the next few hours. This bill, the spending bill, comes at a consequential moment. War in Europe has focused the energies of Congress into getting something done and getting it done fast, quickly. But one crucial element of the funding bill is getting less attention, and that is as important as just about anything in this bill, and that is approving a new round of COVID preparedness funding. For all the important priorities we must address in this spending bill, I believe the COVID funding will go down as one of the most important elements of the omnibus. And I've been pushing really hard to get it done, working across the aisle to convince our Republican colleagues that we need it. Now that all the federal COVID aid under the American Rescue Plan has run out, approving new COVID funding is about insurance. Far better to prepare for new variants today than play a frantic game of catch-up tomorrow when it would be too late. We cannot let it be said that America, after the third or fourth variant hits our shores, is unprepared, does not have adequate testing, therapeutics, vaccines. We cannot let that be said again. The first time it happened, of course we were unprepared. We didn't know what had happened. But unfortunately, even in the second and third, President Trump's administration was not very eager to move forward, trying to ignore it, saying it didn't really present a danger, which of course it has. So now Democrats and Republicans, thankfully, have come together, and both sides of the aisle have come to realize that new COVID funding today is about insurance. Far better to prepare today than play a frantic game of catch-up tomorrow when it's too late. The funding will support more vaccines, testing, therapeutics, and healthcare workers. And that's why I've been pushing so hard to get it done. Across the country, life's returning to normal, thankfully. Cases are falling. More people are going about without masks. Restaurants, churches, and stores are filling up. I see that in my hometown of New York. Most importantly, classrooms are full. Schools are staying open. Now that we're turning the corner, now that we're getting back to normal, the last thing we can afford to do is let our guard down, lest a new variant come back with a vengeance and catapults us all back to square one, a place we all do not want to be. Sadly, we know from experience that another variant is a very real possibility. No one can say for sure no one can say for certain how the virus will mutate. But today we have the tools and know-how to fight this virus the minute it hits our shores, while preserving as much of normal life as possible. All that's needed is the federal funding, and $15 billion of that funding will be in the omnibus bill. So that's why I pushed so hard to get COVID funding into the spending bill. I'm encouraged to see that members have come around to recognize its importance, and I hope we can get it done very, very soon. Furthermore, I am pleased that we are likewise close, very close, to passing a strong and ample aid package that will help the people of Ukraine fight against Putin's immoral war. They desperately need humanitarian aid, as millions of people are without food, without heat, without shelter, without medicine. They desperately need the arms to defend themselves against brutal Russian aggression, often viciously aimed at civilians who are escaping. We've pledged to get something big done, and in the coming hours, I expect we'll be able to announce that we have followed through. And another matter, a lot is going on in the Senate this week. I'm pleased to report that as soon as today, the Senate is set to deliver for the post office. Post office usually delivers for us, but today we're going to deliver for them. Every single day, tens of millions of Americans rely on the post office for life's daily essentials. Seniors and veterans rely on it for their medication. Small business owners rely on it to keep their operations going. Small towns and rural Americans use it to stay connected. And every time we receive a wedding invitation, birthday message, or postcard from a relative, it's almost always the post office at work, making us happy, receiving those nice letters and birthday cards from brothers and sisters and relatives and friends from far-flung places. But we all know the frustrations of waiting on packages that fail to arrive on time. We all know that when the post office is forced to cut hours of operation or delivery routes or lay off workers, the rest of us are worse off. Thankfully, for the past few months, Democrats and Republicans have been working together in good faith to reform some of the most troubled parts of the Postal Service. Now, we are only one roll call away from sending this bill to the President's desk, and that vote is likely to come today. After the Senate votes on this bill, we will happily be able to say that finally, postal reform is signed, sealed, and delivered for the American people. I look forward to getting this done, and thank my colleagues, especially Senators Peters and Portman, for their bipartisan work. And on costs, the costs that the American people face when they buy the things that they buy weekly through their daily lives. Yesterday, we saw another instance of Republicans going out of the way to show the American people where their priorities lie. A few months ago, the junior senator from Florida callously called inflation, quote, a gold mine for the Republican Party. People are suffering and paying more. And the senator from Florida says it's a gold mine for the Republicans. A few weeks ago, we saw what he meant. That same senator released a party platform that openly called for raising taxes on millions of American families, potentially by more than $1,000 a year. People can't afford that. And yesterday, the junior senator from Wisconsin called for the GOP to revive their failed efforts to rip away affordable health care for tens of millions of Americans. A fresh reminder of an old desire that Republicans have harbored for over a decade. Cheerleading inflation, raising taxes on working Americans, repealing affordable health care. Is that the platform of today's Republican Party? At this point, perhaps the senator from Wisconsin should join the senator from Florida in creating a new Hurting Working Families Caucus so we can more easily track their truly repressive vision for the American people. Meanwhile, Democrats believe we should be lowering costs for Americans, not raising them. We should be working on a bipartisan basis to fight inflation, not root for it to go up. So tomorrow, Democrats will hold our annual DPCC retreat to discuss our plan to lower costs, building on historic job growth and expand opportunity for the middle class. Over the next few months, my colleagues will be holding hearings and markups on many of our cost-cutting proposals. Among the ideas we're working on include bills to cap insulin costs at $35 a month, lowering the cost of meat at the grocery store, reforming unfair shipping practices that raise the costs of American goods for everybody, and fixing domestic supply chains. These are issues that the American people need help with. It is what Democrats will maintain a focus on. And I thank my Republican colleagues for helping us remind the American people which party truly stands in their corner. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.